This deck is crazy. I'm Uncorrupt. We're taking a look at Deathrattle Rogue. If you enjoy playing Rogue, but you're kind of tired of playing with your chemistry set, you don't like mixing up potions, maybe you're tired of playing Sinstone Graveyards and Necrolord Drakas, you're definitely going to want to take a look at this deck. Speaking of the list, here it is. Quick shout out to Briarthorn_ on Twitter. They posted the list, and that's where I found it. One thing that you're going to notice is going to set this Deathrattle Rogue list apart from other Deathrattle Rogues that you've seen in the past. There's no Naval Mines, there's no weapons, and there's also no Burning Blade Acolytes. The minions that are included, of course, always Forsaken Lieutenant. It's just a core card as part of the Deathrattle package. But it's the new card, Scourge Illusionist, as well as 2 copies of Masked Reveler and a copy of Invincible. Invincible is what really makes the deck go round. If you don't own this card, this deck is probably not going to be a deck for you. I would recommend right now that you don't craft this card. I have no idea how good this deck is actually going to be, and I'd hate to see you waste your resources. I'm sure you're probably working with limited dust, as we all are. Pretty much the way you can expect the game to go is we want the Scourge Illusionist to be able to make us some extra cheap copies of cards that are in our deck, which would be something like a 2-mana Masked Reveler or even a 4-mana Invincible, and then we're able to just multiply our Death Rattles from there with the Forsaken Lieutenants as well as the Snowfall Graveyard. And listen, I gotta be honest, just talking about this deck is never going to do it justice. You're going to have to actually see it. Let's hop into a game and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right off the bat here, it looks like we're against Death Knight. If you're anything like me, you've probably been seeing a lot of Death Knight on the ladder, which isn't unexpected. So in the mulligan for this deck, you know, Sketchy Information is a keep, the Snowfall Graveyard is a keep, and the Scourge Illusionist is also a keep. We really just want to look for our Deathrattle package things, because that's where our power spike is going to come from here. I'm just going to go ahead and play the Gone Fishing, take a look at the bottom of my deck. And not really a whole lot of good options here. We'll take the Sketchy Information. Also, by the way, the Forsaken Lieutenant would also be a keep in the mulligan. The reason why I played the Gone Fishing on turn 1 is because it was either that or pass, and I want to go ahead and take a look at the bottom of my deck just because maybe it might change my play for turn 2 with this particular deck. So here I want to coin and Sketchy Information. And then you can see here the only 4-drop that's in the deck is actually the Scourge Illusionist, and we're able to get a 4-mana Invincible. So unfortunately with this deck, if you draw Invincible, it's not impossible to win, but it is very, very hard, and likely we just wouldn't have enough time to be able to win if that were the case. But this is a created copy of Invincible. That means Invincible is still in the deck, so we could still end up with more copies of Invincible. And Forsaken Lieutenant is an interesting pickup here. I think I'm just going to play the Door of Shadows. We don't really need the extra copy. Shadow of Demise, not the best thing that we could actually get here, but better than nothing, I guess. We just want to be able to cycle through our deck a little bit. And likely on turn 4, I'm just going to drop the Invincible. So one thing that you'll notice here is, well, first of all, we're going to want to make sure that we attack with the Forsaken Lieutenant first before it transforms. But when Invincible is played, you're going to see the buff land on the Forsaken Lieutenant, and then it's going to transfer into a 2/2 copy of the Deathrattle minion that we played. So sometimes you'll end up in some spots where you have a really buffed Forsaken Lieutenant. And sometimes maybe you don't want to play a Deathrattle minion because you don't want to transform it. So I say that because specifically I had a game against a mage where I had a Forsaken Lieutenant that was still in stealth, but it was like a 22/22 because so many of the Invincible buffs had landed on it. It's actually not that uncommon with this deck to be able to get, you know, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 Invincibles, maybe even more on the board at the same time. Those are the games that, you know, you've high rolled and absolutely won. But when you look at what's going on here, we're just in a really, really strong position early in the game. We also have the Snowfall Graveyard in hand. I think it's probably important to not play that too soon. Ideally, we would want to have something like a Preparation or maybe even a Prep Serrated Bone Spike to be able to get that graveyard out just a little bit sooner. But for this turn in particular, I want to just go ahead and play the Scourge Illusionist, because I want to have multiple minions on the board. So if my opponent's able to do something that kills my Invincible, I want to make sure that there's still a minion on the board to be able to get buffed. And you can see here they actually do that with the Sylvanas. Against DK specifically, if they're playing Blood, you know, they've got Asphyxiate. They have a few other ways to be able to remove individual minions, so I kind of always want to prioritize having multiple minions on the board, at least in this matchup. Could actually trade here into the Sylvanas. That's... I mean, it's a trade, but then that leaves us with only one minion on the board. Again, I'm kind of a little bit concerned about only having one minion left on the board. I think I definitely want to play a Snowfall Graveyard this turn. It's just time. And I'm looking, you know, if I could prep Graveyard and then play the Masked Reveler, that would probably be the best turn, but unfortunately, I'm just not able to do that. We're going to be 1 mana short. And then also keeping in mind that the Shadow of Demise here is going to, every time we play a different spell, it's actually going to overwrite it with the spell that we've most recently played here. So I definitely want to get down the Snowfall Graveyard, and I think I just want to go ahead and push the 1 damage here. We're not going to draw, but, you know, you always push the 1. Could have considered swinging with the 5/1 face and then going Ghastly Strike to be able to buff our minion. But again, I just want to keep 2 minions here, so I'm not trading, I'm not killing my own minion. And that's another important point with this deck. A lot of times you're actually going to want to use those direct damage spells to kill your own minion. And that way you can attack with it, then kill your own minion, buff a different minion at go face. You can actually create a lot of damage, and pretty good. To be honest, this game is actually just a little bit tame. We have been able to get out some big minions early, but we just haven't developed that wide board that you see. Patchwork coming down from our opponent, so this is another perfect example of why I like to keep multiple minions on the board in the matchup. And we just win. Taking a look at another game here. Looks like we're going to be up against Druid this time. Again, Druid for me is something that I'm seeing a lot of. I don't know if you are, but it appears to be a very popular deck. And what I tend to see is a lot of ramp and a lot of alignments, which are very similar, but just a little bit different. So we got a good hand here. Again, we look for our Deathrattle stuff, Forsaken Lieutenant. We've got the sketchy information as well as the Snowfall Graveyard. So this hand is looking pretty good. Druid doesn't really have a way to be able to remove the stealth Forsaken Lieutenant, so we're going to go ahead and toss that out. I think in most situations I would probably just go ahead and throw out the Forsaken Lieutenant. Sometimes if you're against, say, maybe Rogue, they can create a concoction that can randomly remove your minion. I've had that happen, but a lot of times it could be worth it. And the Druids actually played Due Process here, so that's good for us in that we're going to be able to get more cards in our hand. You know, that's certainly going to be a help here. The issue with that could actually be, though, if we draw Invincible, it's going to make it probably impossible to win in this particular matchup, just because we're not going to have that many turns to be able to wait to play Invincible for 8 mana. But we're going to hope for the best here. I've learned in life that as long as you hope for the best, good things tend to happen. Sometimes. And our opponent's just going to tempo out the Astalor, so kind of curious, you know, what our opponents think when we're playing this. They're probably expecting, like, naval mines and things like that, and that's just not the list. So pretty straightforward on the turn 3 here with the sketchy information. And looks like we do have room to be able to draw 2 cards without burning. But again, we've been able to create an Invincible. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes actually Invincible may be the worst card to create from the sketchy information. Being able to play a Masked Reveler for only 2 mana is really good, especially if you're able to get down the Snowfall Graveyard first. So we're going to make sure that we attack here, and then we're going to play the Invincible. I just want to make sure that we don't miss that 2 damage. And I'm actually going to trade into the 3/2 here, because that Deathrattle is going to go off. It's going to buff and give taunt to our other copy of Invincible. Again, Druid, they don't really have direct damage spells, so our 5/1 is likely safe here. Unless there's something I'm forgetting, or they're running something that I'm not familiar with. Again, still early in the meta. And we're in a pretty good spot here as far as what's going on. So again, this is going to be a turn where we're likely going to want to get down a Snowfall Graveyard. Looks like we just burned our second copy, but that's not really going to matter. I'm going to push the 5 face here, and then we'll be able to play Snowfall Graveyard. And then I'm actually going to use my own direct damage spell to kill my 5/1. That's going to give 10/10 to the Invincible that's on the board here. That's actually going to set up lethal for next turn. So our opponent is going to either have to remove this Invincible, or they're going to have to do some kind of healing, otherwise we kill him. And then, of course, we still have direct damage spells in hand as well if we do need that last little bit of damage. Druid not really known for single target removal, so I feel much more comfortable with just 1 minion on the board. Unfortunately, it looks like we're getting high rolled here because they just so happen to have the Anubricon in hand, along with an Innervate. Not sure I've ever seen any kind of combo this early, but they are low on armor, which is going to be a benefit for us. It's going to limit how many cards they can play this turn and what they can do. And I believe there should be a lethal here. We should be able to remove the 4/6 punch face. And yeah, absolutely. So Tooth of Nefarian and Wicked Stab are going to clear the 4/6, and then we're going to be able to punch face, and then we're going to have the Tooth of Nefarian here. And that's actually just going to do it for this game. You can see Deathrattle Rogue. This deck is crazy. I'm Uncorrupt. Thanks for watching. Good luck out on the ladder.